So, Martha, the next question I had for you was around your insights on lipopolysaccharides. So, what's your data telling you on lipopolysaccharides? Firstly, when it comes to Parkinson's, let's hone in a little bit on that. And then more broadly on other disease mechanisms in the body.
Well, so I wasn't originally that focused on lipopolysaccharide in Parkinson's. And I can't remember exactly how I came back around to it, but I was like, oh, I know. So there's a researcher, he just passed away last year. I think he was 95. His name is Isaac Ginsburg. And he worked a lot in sepsis. He was a dentist, researcher, prolific researcher, was still writing papers all the way up until he died. But he had a hypothesis of post-infectious sequela from bacteriolysis. So basically, the cellular debris from the bacteria that's still floating around in the system that's causing inflammation. And I read his paper, I think in 2015, and started emailing back, and he actually invited me to call him. I talked to him on the phone. So that sort of started me thinking about that. And as I looked at it, there's actually an animal model for Parkinson's called the LPS-induced Parkinson's model. And I'm like, okay, well, if you can make a mouse get Parkinson's with LPS, why aren't you asking what LPS producing bacteria are in people with Parkinson's? And let's address that. I mean, it just seemed pretty logical to me. But so then I, started kind of expanding from there about how LPS, is this inflammatory trigger for so many different diseases. And so we did a clinical trial last summer in diabetes in Cuba, where my chief scientific officer, Raul, was born. And, we're doing all the standard, fasting blood glucose, postprandial, HOMA IR, insulin, HbA1c. And I said, can we do serum LPS? And they're like, sure, we can do that. And that turned out to be one of the fastest moving markers that we had. So in the at 90 and 180 days, at 90 days, LPS had dropped substantially in the serum, and at 180 days, it wasn't non-existent, but it was it was almost non-existent. So we definitely we don't know exactly the mechanism at this point. We haven't spent a lot of time digging into that, and we're still working on the microbiome paper from the data that, because we first did 16S and then we decided to go ahead and do the shotgun sequencing. So we're in the process of doing all the analytics around that to see if there's signal in the genes from the whole genome sequencing that can give us a clue to how that might be working. But it was very exciting. And I think that's probably one of the ways that it was helping my husband too.
Oh, it's fascinating. Just this as a side note. So LPS, lipopolysaccharide, basically cellular walls of gram-negative bacteria. So it's a certain staining methodology that sort of highlights which ones have this LPS. Hexa LPS is the particularly inflammatory version. But there's a lot of work happening on the LPS space in terms of how it can pass through the gut into the blood, into the brain. So it's very exciting to again see information coming hot off the press, and how your study evolves, and what sort of data and insights we can get out of it. So again, watch this space on Martha's work in terms of LPS. Anything else you want to say on LPS and other disease mechanisms?
I probably leave that to somebody who's dug deeper down that pathway. I've actually been off in a totally different direction related to minerals availability. And I think that the other thing, we talked a bit about the yogurt, but making minerals more available. So for the last 2 months have been very deep in research with Morley Robbins. I think you know him.
Of course.
Looking at this enzyme called the PAM enzyme that a lot of people have never heard of. It is required for amidating about 279 peptides that we have found so far, and there's probably more than that. And it requires 2 atoms of copper. And glyphosate chelates copper, and a number of the microbes in my formula have multi-copper oxidases. So we think they may be able to chaperone and bring that copper where it needs to go to help some of those things. And that, Reuteri may be one of those microbes too, because as you know, Dr. Davis is looking at that in oxytocin, and oxytocin is one of those peptides that has to be amidated with the PAM enzyme. So
it's incredible because your formula just touches so many different avenues. So you got deuterium depletion, you got the copper mechanism as well with Morley's work. So it's incredible that you've managed to formulate it. So how about we talk more about Biotiquest, your baby that you created? How did you formulate? How did you pick those particular strains? Because I think it's very important for people to realize that the strain is everything. So genus, species is not enough, and not enough detail about the organism. It's like a difference between a cat and a particular breed of cat, or just saying dog, or saying Rottweiler or German Shepherd. So it's very specific. So what was your mindset when you formulated, let's talk about Sugar Shift and then some of the other amazing products that you have on the market?
Sure. So, when I started out to make Sugar Shift, I was looking to just make something to help John. I was like, can we make mannitol in the gut? And so the key organisms we were looking at were Bacillus subtilis, Leuconostoc, and Reuteri that all make mannitol. But we knew, we needed a combination that was sort of sustainable and could keep itself going. And so, we looked for a method of kind of putting a mixture together that would balance the pH and be self-sustaining for, let's say, 10 to 12 hours. And we already knew we had the plantarum that had the glyphosate remediating, so we wanted to include that as well. So, we've kind of just played around and in some ways got lucky. So my Steve Cosme, the fermentation chemist friend of mine who helped me with the formula, he had actually his own Lactobacillus reuteri that he had done a lot of research on and was working in animal health, hadn't used it on the human side. And so we used his Lactobacillus reuteri, and we used it at a pretty high percentage of the formula because we knew it had some pretty powerful capabilities from some of the research that he had done. But, in some ways, like when we first formulated it, it was a little bit of a just sort of luck, I would say. And then we said, okay, we've got to figure out, does it really do what we think it does? And so, we were looking at the before and after microbiome, and then we had more people do the before and after microbiome, and we could see upregulated genes involved in butyrate, mannitol production, siderophores. And then one big surprise is we had a huge drop, like a 60% drop in multi-drug resistant, like antibiotic resistance genes, which is interesting because apparently mannitol also can make antibiotics more effective. So I guess it can overcome the efflux pump or some of that. So that, that was pretty interesting. And in that same time frame, we had brought on board Nasir Sangawan, who had been at University of Chicago and Oregon National Lab, and he was probably one of the top people in terms of using whole genome sequencing, because not a lot of people had big data sets with whole genome. Most everything out there is still just 16S. And I knew from the very beginning, I wanted all the data because I wanted to see specific genes that were involved in specific things, including anything that could give me a clue about glyphosate. And, I was like, it's all going to be, and it's a map when you start looking at those genes and you can see what's going on. It's just amazing. But so then we started taking his computational modeling capabilities and building what we call a bioflux model. It's a flux balance analysis, which, sort of reminds me of Back to the Future and the flux capacitor. And sometimes when we sit around and talk about that stuff, it feels like we're a little Back to the Future, but, and it's basically a model where you feed. So we had roughly 2,500 microbial genomes, individual genomes. And then we use a database from Oregon National Lab that had about 17,000 metabolites that are all based on wet laboratory data of how, microbes with different media and different interactions between different microbes. And so you take all of that computational information and you say, okay, I'm taking these 8 strains, which is what ours is. You feed the genomes into it, takes all of that information, and then, you put like the complete media or, whatever your substrate is going to be, and apply your constraints and run the model for however many hours you're going to, and then it shows you the growth curves of the bacteria during that time frame of each of the strains in your consortium, and it shows you how they cross feed each other. Mm-hmm. And then you can select, different metabolites if you want to look at. So we were, of course, interested in butyrate and mannitol, and we could see how that worked. And then we did our modeling and said, well, what if we take this microbe out? Is it still going to work? And it was like, no, it doesn't work the same way. And, we use that model to look at other people's products. And, we say, like, because so many people just, okay, well, let's throw 12 strains in here and see what happens. Well, you may only get one strain really growing in the end. So that all proved out that, our original kind of hypothesis that we put together did work. And so then we took that computational model and we said, okay, what are the other problems we want to solve? And we wanted to address like general immune system, cardiovascular. We actually have about 24 formulas that we came up with. We only have 5 on the market right now, but, just kind of underlying metabolic problems from, you're not making vitamins right in your gut because bacteria, make your vitamins, or, for mood because some of the neurotransmitters aren't working right. So my chief scientific officer, Dr. Kano, was professor of microbial ecology at Cal Poly for 30 years. I mean, he's world renowned for his work in using microbes to clean up the environment, for paleomicrobiology, for being the first person to sequence a strain of lactobacillus, which of course now you can do in no time at all, but back then it took about a year. And he's just a wealth of knowledge of, okay, what if we did this, this, and this, and then we put it into our system and it would come back out and it would either be what we wanted or not. And so that's how we put together working systems.
That's incredible. I just want to highlight to the audience how brilliant this methodology is, because most of the time formulators will just draw upon almost buzzwords, like Lactobacillus reuteri or Bifidobacter lactis, or whatever the buzzword is in the market, and they whack together a formula, and it's almost like you're hoping that it works. But the brilliance of this methodology is firstly, Martha, your ability to identify experts in the space and then get them on your team and improve the knowledge base of where you're starting from. And then the second brilliance of this is you have a huge amount of existing microbiome data to draw upon, thousands and thousands of different case studies, identify what the missing pieces are, and then you're putting it into a computational model where you can understand the interactions between different microbes and then have target postbiotics, if you like, different types of beneficial compounds that the bacteria process, and then using that sort of theoretical model, then formulating and then creating a product that's actually going to deliver on what your key outcomes are. So that's incredibly sophisticated. So I applaud you for the work that you're doing in this this methodology that you've developed, because I think it's almost you're taking a lot of the analytical thinking from your previous life, and then
Yes.
bringing something very unique to the microbiome space and the formulation of these brilliant probiotics. So that is so exciting. Wow. Incredible.
And then on top of that, then, because Raul is a fantastic microbiologist too, then, we built out a biobank of, our own microbes. So, in our formula, not all of the strains are ours, but, we have 4 unique strains that are ours. And we, in the other formulas that we have a suite of another 10 to 12 that we're looking to bring to market, as we bring new products along.
Absolutely. And I love how you're actually factoring in the interaction between the different microbes, because they're going to either, I think most of the time they're working together. So the numbers of the microbes of these individual strains are very much determined on metabolites that are then feeding the next one. It's almost a bit of a succession. And then the end outcome is what that metabolite that you're trying to produce is based on the combination. But you're doing it in a very clever way, because it's using a model, I imagine a lot of artificial intelligence type stuff, decision trees, and formulating. So wow. So how about we go into, I think the audience is going to be really fascinated to hear about these different probiotic supplements that you've developed. So Biotiquest is very much targeted towards sugar metabolism. Is that correct?
The Sugar Shift is for sugar metabolism.
Oh, sorry. Yep. Biotiquest Sugar Shift. And then you've got Biotiquest. There's an immune supplement that you have.
Yeah. Ideal Immunity.
Ideal Immunity, which is very much to do with boosting the immune system. So how does that work?
So that also produces butyrate and acetate. It produces reduced glutathione, tryptophan, reduces glutamate, and it has a specific strain in it called Lactobacillus ruminus that has a pediosin that is very effective against foodborne pathogens. So we've shown that it can kill 100% of listeria. It's very effective at salmonella and E. coli. In fact, we have had some discussions with people who are interested in potentially using just that strain in food safety.
Wow, almost like just for the audience, if you're making a salami in a processing plant, to add another hurdle onto the food safety aspects or the HACCP aspects, you would spray the bacteria onto the meat as it's fermenting, if that's the process, smoking, whatever they do, just to give another added level of security for the product. Is that the application?
Well, actually for this, it would be more like in food factories and production facilities or restaurants where they have danger of listeria in drains or things like that. They
I
would
see.
actually like use it as a prophylactic
Gotcha.
spray
Gotcha.
or
Which is
down, put it down the drains and things like that. Yeah.
which is brilliant, because if you think about a high risk facility like an aged care where you've got immunocompromised people, most of the time it's just spraying with bleach or hypochlorite and using that sort of method to just nuke everything around. But this methodology is actually applying almost a bacteria that then goes and suppresses the growth of things like listeria that could cause issues.
Right.
Incredible. Wow. I love the thinking.
So, but and the ideal immunity does have all of our formulas contain our lactobacillus plantarum that has the ability to break down the glyphosate. But the ideal immunity also has some of those core sugar conversion strains in it as well. Then we have our heart-centered product that's designed to support cardiovascular health. So coenzyme Q10 production, tyrosine production, short chain fatty acid, and butyrate again, and then it supports nitric oxide production.
Wow.
So
could that help with things like I'm just thinking when you mentioned nitric oxide, sports performance or erectile dysfunction or something like that?
So, I mean, it's interesting because after we named it heart centered, we were having a conversation with somebody and they said, you should really change the name of it and like call it force of nature. I don't. So we have talked about that. We should probably write a blog about it or something.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I mean, it's another problem to solve, isn't it, with the community? So absolutely highlighting these benefits will be definitely helpful.
And then we have a simple Slumber product that we brought out last summer. So that was designed to make tryptophan. The bacteria also make melatonin. It increases the reduced form of glutathione and alanine. It activates the opiate receptors and GABA production. So that system works together for about 7 hours. So it'll start to wear off before somebody wakes up. But and that is I think 6 strains. And then we have one we designed for taking after you take antibiotics, because what was interesting, there was a paper that came out of the Weizmann Institute where they had looked at a group of 11 strains. I think I was able to discern that it actually was a product, but it looks like in the paper it's just 11 strains, but I think it's actually a product. But they looked at that after taking antibiotics, and they actually found that it was not beneficial. And so we ran that formula through our computational model. But even before we ran it through the model, Raul looked at it and he said, well, no, you wouldn't want to do that because it's going to make the whole system way too acidic and you won't be able to repopulate with a broader set of microbes. And so, we sat down and said, okay, well, what can we do? And Raul sort of went away and did a little bit of his magic and came back and said, well, what about this? And then we ran it through the model and, was like, great. And so we had it kind of on we're going to bring this out, when we start moving along at a faster pace or whatever. And then Steve, who I told you, who had helped me with the Sugar Shift probiotic, his mother had ruptured her appendix. She's in her 80s, and she was after her surgery and recovery, she ended up getting sepsis and having to go back and be on IV antibiotics for over a month. And she was having a lot of digestive problems after that. And her doctor's like, well, that's, they weren't really helping her. And Steve said, when are you going to make the antibiotic antidote? Can you make it? And I was like, let me look at my, strain inventory and see if, my manufacturer can make me a small batch. And so I made a small batch of 200 bottles. So Steve's mom could have some antibiotic antidote. And she called me 2 or 3 times. She wrote me the nicest review. She's like, this has turned my life around. And Steve laughed because his father's a professor at the School of Mines. And he said, I've been talking to my parents about probiotics for because he's in the business. And he goes, they finally got it after your product after all these years. But so we brought that product out and we said, this is a limited time. And, it sold out right away. And then I had a couple of dentists that were interested in it because they give out antibiotics a lot of times prophylactically. And so I have some dentists who recommend that one. And then we have one called Perfect Peace that we haven't brought out yet, but it seems like these days there's so much anxiety and stuff. We should probably go ahead and bring that one out. But the Perfect Peace is designed for tryptophan production and aspartate reduction. And again, helping activate the opioid receptors and reducing glutamate and increasing butyrate. So,
wow, that's brilliant. So the antibiotic version, is that available now? The antibiotic,
it is actually
antibiotic antidote.
Yeah,
yes, and then the mental health calming one. That's Watch This Space, or is it ready?
Yeah, watch this space.
Watch This Space.
We'd like to bring it out this year, but a lot just sort of depends on the pace of the world is so unpredictable these days. We like to just stay on our toes and but I have had a lot of people requesting that. And we're bringing out in the next month a yogurt starter with so it's Sugar Shift just in a powder with a scoop.
Brilliant.
So because so many people from Dr. Davis's group make the yogurt with it. I was like, and I've had some people who when you're doing the capsules, so we use a cellulose, but there are some people who have sensitivity to the cellulose who have asked me, can you make a product without that? And so I was like, oh, okay, I'll make the yogurt starter. And if they don't want to make yogurt, they can just sprinkle it on their food.
Right. That's so clever. Brilliant. Because I don't think there is a product in the market that's a reutery yogurt starter. I think it's all about people just using capsules of probiotics at the moment. So there's definitely a gap in the market for that. That's brilliant.
Yeah, not that one, not Ridra by itself, but there is Cutting Edge Cultures, I think, makes one that has they're coming out with one that has because his combination is Bacillus coagulans, Gasseri, and the Rudra. And so I think Cutting Edge Cultures maybe has that. But most of them are buying individual, and you're right, just opening up capsules.
That's it. Exactly right.
Mad science.
So one final question to tap into the mad scientist that you are. So a lot of the times when we name these supplements, it's like, okay, it's good for your heart, it's good for your sleep or your mood or sugar metabolism, whatever it is. But sometimes there's some left of field ailments that some of these supplements could tackle, IBS or constipation, diarrhea. Is there anything that any of these products mentioned could potentially tackle? Dysbiosis is another one. So any of these supplements you can recommend for any of these left field type of concerns?
So Sugar Shift, one of the so in Parkinson's, many people with Parkinson's have chronic constipation and report to me that it's the only thing that's ever helped them with constipation. So mannitol is an osmotic diuretic. It's also an osmoprotectant. So it's got some sort of osmotic sensing ability. And I have had people with so I have a doctor in Hawaii who basically got a virus from a patient of his who went to the jungle in South America back in 1970. And it caused him to have severe chronic diarrhea from 1970 forward. He tried everything. He was taking Lamodal several times a day. Nothing was working. He tried all these different probiotics, and his daughter found us and said, you need to try this. And he's like, it's not going to work. And it worked for him. And, wow. But for him, whatever it is that he has, he can't stop taking. So if he stopped taking it, whatever is that it's keeping in check is still there. It hasn't gotten rid of it. It's just, it's like you brought the police in and they're keeping order. So, I do think by changing that metabolism, you can certainly make some of those things better, but none of these are specifically targeted to that. But I will tell you, we are working with a scientist I met through my Parkinson's research who does a lot of autoimmune related work. And he has done work in Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, lupus, pretty interesting. And we're working on a strain of bacteria that he had that has the potential to be really beneficial in like IBS, in that sort. And they've shown it in dairy cattle that it works for a similar issue in dairy cattle. And so we're in the process of doing a safety study right now. So our relationship with the hospital in Cuba, where we did our clinical trial, we're now doing safety studies for different strains for other people. So we have Raul has 2 strains with his company, a Bacillus clausii and a Bacillus coagulans. And then Dr. Dow's strain, which I won't say what that is yet. It's a surprise. And then, and then I have this other strain in the back of my mind that I really want to bring to market someday that like it's, and I actually grew it up. I grew it up in the lab and took it myself a month, like a year ago. And I was like, I think this microbe is going to be amazing, but it might be a little while before we can bring that one to market.
Sure. I'm so excited to hear more about it. I think you've left a lot of bookmarks for the audience to come back to after listening to this episode. So perhaps we have to do a round 2 at some point. Well,
that would be fun.
Well, I won't take up any more of your time. I really appreciate you coming onto the podcast. I think there's a wealth of knowledge and information on this podcast. So thank you so much. And what I like to do at the end of all my podcasts is to get it from the horse's mouth. What's your best recommendation? If you could be one thing you could do for your gut health today, what would be your number 1 recommendation?
Avoid glyphosate.
Oh, wow. That's great. That's amazing. That's a good way. It's perfect for my company called Nourish Me Organic. So we're all about getting away from all the chemicals and especially the negative aspects of things like glyphosate. So thank you so much for your time, Carla. Lovely to speak, Martha. Sorry, I've jumbled up your name.
That's okay.
Martha, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.